Good morning, everyone. This is Doug. We're going to review a claim of Toviah Singer that claims Isaiah 53 is not about a singular person, the suffering servant, but is about the people of Israel who are suffering. And this mismatches the context, but that I'm not going to deal with that today in particular. I'll mention it. We're going to look at one particular verse, the primary verse upon which he relies, which is verse 8, where he claims there's a plural to them, not to him. And I decided, you know what, let me check where is Toviah Singer getting his sources from. So I purchased his two books and I read through his Isaiah 53 section, and he never tells you what source he's relying upon. But I can tell you, when you compare his source or translation, maybe of his own making, of the Masoretic text, uh, he is mismatching the most scholarly sources. Jewish Publication Society has to be number one. 1917 work, still considered the authority among Jewish people primarily. Then there's Mr. Leeser. He's a Jewish scholar who's the first to translate into English. So he has another version of chapter 53. And we're going to see his version of verse 8, which is the central argument of Mr. Singer. His version doesn't match Mr. Singer's version materially. His work is 1853. Just want to show you this work on the side here. I'm showing you. There's his name, Isaac Leeser. And you'll see he's saying he's translating according to the Masoretic text. He's claiming it was carefully translated, so he's claiming to be authoritative. And of the text itself, he's claiming there's more than one Masoretic text to look at, and he says he's making it after the best Jewish authorities. Okay, so there are various authorities. Some are better than others. I didn't know that. I thought maybe there's only one Masoretic text. No, there's multiple, and it's obviously multiple because even the Jewish Publication Society and Leeser don't agree, as you'll see. Then, of course, now we have the Dead Sea Scroll text we have to consider, because now that should trump anything, because anything that's oldest, meaning from 150 BC, is the text of Isaiah 53. We'll mention here later. That means presumptively anything that changed or is different later was due to scribal error or issues of that kind. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up here that Leeser at 53:8 of Isaiah has a similar text to Singer's, but his is singular and not plural. And I want to suggest to you that Isaac Leeser, it's obvious reading his preface that he's a top scholar of translating from Hebrew to English. And again, this was one of the most earliest translations for the Jewish people in English. It apparently wasn't even the first one. So just like we didn't have the Roman Catholic Church prohibited Gentiles from having anything but Latin, the Jewish people only had Hebrew for millennia. But Leeser turns it into English. So this is when we first see it. And again, it's from 1853. Okay, so let's begin. Now, the issue is the source text of Singer materially mismatches JPS, Jewish Publication Society, Leeser, and the Dead Sea Scrolls text. So right off the bat, you have to ask yourself, what is the foundation upon which you can accept anything Mr. Singer says? It has to be based on having a reliable text or himself being a reliable translator. And that does not appear to be the case, either one. Or one of the other isn't true. He doesn't have a reliable text, or he himself is not a reliable translator, because I would put more stake on Mr. Leeser, who's looking at obviously the same manuscript that Mr. Singer is, or at least the same words, but he comes out with a singular. You'll see why that's singular, meaning, again, is it a singular person? That's what Singer says, that it isn't. And he uses this verse 8 of Isaiah 53 to claim it's plural and not singular. But here's the Mr. Leeser saying it's singular. As you'll see, the Jewish Publication Society doesn't even have this language that even raises the question. And neither does the Dead Sea Scroll have the language. So the Jewish Publication Society and the Dead Sea Scrolls appear to be in agreement that the verse language involved here, the clause about a plague happened to them, is not even in the passage. That's the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's the Jewish Publication Society. But Mr. Leeser has the same version, obviously, as Mr. Singer, but he translates it as singular, not plural, as Mr. Singer does. Okay, so that's a heads up. Now let's dive deeper into this. Okay, so we're going to look at page 94 of Toviah Singer's Let's Get Biblical. This is where he explains the text scope is from Isaiah 52, verse 13 to Isaiah 53, verse 12. Then he's going to show us, we'll see, verse 8. Let's read verse 8. From imprisonment and from judgment he is taken, and his generation who shall tell? For he was cut off from the land of the living. So far, does that not sound like an individual who's the suffering servant, a singular person? I think so. Then he has this. Because of the transgression of my people, a plague befell them. Now, I just want to show you something. If you didn't have the words, a plague befell them, and you didn't have that punctuation like that, let me show you what it reads in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Jewish Publication Society version of the Masoretic text. For he was cut off from the land of the living because of the transgression of my people. That's how it reads in the Dead Sea Scrolls, earliest version of the Masoretic text, theoretically, right? The Masoretes had to rely upon the text that came before, and that doesn't even have a plague befell them. And the Jewish Publication Society doesn't have a plague befell them. So just so you know. So the whole premise of Mr. Singer is the word them there is plural, and therefore, because that's plural, we're talking about the suffering servant is a collective people of the people of Israel, which also doesn't make sense if you read it in context, because of the transgression of my people, a plague befell them. Does not talk about or answer to who is this from imprisonment and from judgment he is taken. This is Toviah Singer's own words here, right? His translation of it. How does the people of Israel go from imprisonment and from judgment he is taken, and his generation who shall tell? Like, will he have any offspring because of this imprisonment and judgment? I mean, it fits Jesus, but it doesn't fit the people of Israel as a people. For he was cut off from the land of the living. What, are all Israel killed from the land of the living? I don't think so. So there's such ridiculous application by Mr. Singer to think just because the word them here is here, he's going to say this is a plural. We're talking about a plural people. And he doesn't make just a little point about it. This is his key point in his argument about Isaiah 53. So let's continue. I want you to see his argument. Let's look. You're using a pointer. I'm going to read it to you. The prophet's use of the Hebrew pronoun, lamo. So where it says to them in his version is lamo, he's saying, which means to them, for the servant. In 53 verse 8 creates a staggering problem for Christian translators who are committed to casting Jesus as the servant of Isaiah 53. No, I don't think this is any longer the problem of Christian translators. There's something going on here amongst you. you, the translator. No other translation has your unique translation. And two of the primary texts, the Jewish Publication Society and the Dead Sea Scrolls, don't even have this clause, and a plague befell them at all, whether them or him. Okay, let's keep going. The Jewish people are frequently addressed in Tanakh in the singular form in the order to highlight the nation's singular destiny. Okay, so now what is he telling you? He wants you to believe in the text I just read you that the one who's taken from imprisonment to judgment and all this stuff, and who can talk about his generation, and he's going to be cut off from the land of living. No, that's not a singular person, even though it reads that way, because of the word them here, because a plague befell them, the people. And that doesn't even follow in context, as I showed you. But anyway, let's keep going. The prophets, however, never speak of an individual in the plural. Therefore, the use of the Hebrew word them, and he hasn't established that, and I hope I've casted doubt on that, and you'll see I'll give you the proof. them demonstrates that the sermon of Isaiah 53 is not a single individual. No, you haven't proven that at all, from context or from meaning, because you haven't told us your source text. And I'm going to insist upon that. Everywhere in the Let's Get Biblical, I've reviewed every one of his citations. None of them tell you his source text. I've looked at his bibliography. He has no source Bible that he references. He doesn't have a bibliography of all things. He has an index of all the Bible verses, but he never tells us what Bible he's relying upon. So it could be garbage in, garbage out. What is his text? So his arguments have to depend on something. So I'm going to say he's got to reissue those books with actual reference to the Bible he's referencing and prove does it even exists. Christian Bibles has escaped the nagging problem by mistranslating the Hebrew word, I guess that's an important word, as him, olomo, I guess he said, lamo, he said it's here, to as him in the singular rather than them. And I'm going to prove to you today that the only translation that somewhat agrees with him is Leeser, and he translates it as him. So how bad could the Christian Bibles be if they do exactly what a Jewish scholar did? It can't be wrong. Let's continue. So now I want to show you how much emphasis Mr. Singer puts on this topic. So let's take a look. Finally, why do renowned Christian Bibles translate the Hebrew word elamo as to him in Isaiah 53:8? Well, maybe you would need to ask Mr. Leeser the same thing. Okay, so let's now look in a digression at Mr. Leeser. So we have him saying him here, okay? So let's read this whole passage from Mr. Leeser. Again, you remember he wrote this book in 1853, the first English translation from Hebrew into English, top scholar in Judaism, top leader in Judaism, okay? And he's basing it on the Masoretic text from the best Jewish scriptures, okay? And then he says this is how it reads entirely in verse 8. Through oppression and through judicial punishment was he taken away. But his generation, who could tell that he was cut out of the land of life, that for the transgression of my people the plague was laid on him. So it's not them, as he claims. This is a Masoretic text. It claims it's from the best Jewish collection of the Masoretic text. Okay, so why does he say him, Mr. Singer? So I have to know what text you're relying upon. I can tell this man is relying upon the Masoretic text. He's doing this on behalf of all of the Jewish people, and he's translating it on him. Why would he get it wrong? And you, a person who, from your own biography, only tell us that you learned in your Shabbat school when you were a kid some Hebrew. And of course, now you speak Hebrew. But how do you know that you are reading the right text? This requires expertise to pick the right text out of assortment of texts. And that's what he claims he was doing. But you claim this is your translation, befell them. That's not what he has. He has it on him. And therefore you contradict Mr. Leeser of 1853. Now, of course, just to show you, again, what is the Dead Sea Scrolls? It doesn't have this plague was laid on him. The Jewish Publication Society 1917 translation doesn't have the plague was laid on him at all. That phrase doesn't even exist in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the earliest version of Isaiah. It doesn't exist in the Jewish Publication Society version of the Masoretic text that they're looking at. And if you read it without that, it makes more sense. Through oppression and through judicial punishment was he taken away. But his generation, who could tell that he was cut away out of the land of life? And then don't read that there. He's supposing it exists. For the transgressions of my people. So he was cut away out of the land of life for the transgressions of my people. So the phrase, the plague was laid on him, doesn't make any necessary sense there. It doesn't fit the context exactly. Why would we bring that up? And it wasn't in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is the definitive and determinative outcome. So even this man is relying upon a Masoretic text, but it doesn't agree with Mr. Singer about the word him, that he's laying a lot of emphasis on. Okay, so let's get back to the Jewish Publication Society Bible. I'll put a highlight on that. It's over here, Jewish Publication Society Bible. It's in this beige or light brown text, and here's verse 8. See that? So let's read that. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and with his generation who did reason? For he was cut off out of the land of the living for the transgression of my people, to whom the stroke was due. Okay, but you don't see anything about a plague befell them. Not at all. So you don't have anything to justify what Toviah Singer says is there, and then he claims it's a them and a plural, and so all of that goes out the window. Again, the Jewish Publication Society Bible claims in 1917 it's based on the Masoretic text. And so therefore, what's the conclusion? Toviah Singer's claim about Isaiah 53 verse 8 contradicts the Jewish Publication Society version of 1917. Okay, so all we can say is, Mr. Singer, we're now going to wait for you to tell us what text you relied upon, and I would ask you, please send us the Masoretic text site so we can verify with outside neutral experts that you're correct. Maybe you are correct, but it doesn't seem so far. Okay, so now let's look at the Dead Sea Scrolls version of Isaiah 53 verse 8 in particular. We are comparing this, just to remember what we're doing, to Isaiah 53 verse 8 in Toviah Singer's version on the left side of the screen from page 103 of his book, Let's Get Biblical. In his, you can see here he has the words, plague befell them, and yet it reads similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls otherwise. From imprisonment and from judgment, he is taken singular, and his generation singular. Who shall tell? But Toviah's going to say, because it says them at the end here, you know it's really a plural. For he was cut off from the land of the living because of the transgression of my people. Period. If you ended there, it would be this person was made to suffer for the sins of the people, right? But Toviah Singer says there's an extra sentence or clause. It says a plague befell them. Excuse me. Because of the transgressions of my people, a plague befell them. So instead of the reason this person is cut off is because of the transgression of my people, this clause says, because of the transgression of my people, a plague befell them. So this is trying to assign some bad consequence to the people due to their transgression. Now, people there is a uniplural, so that means it's really multiple people inside of a singular word. So people is singular, but the content is plural, so that's where the word then is referring back to my people. So because of the transgression of my people, a plague befell them. So that was the intent of this extra clause here. And but still, again, I've said this before, just because, even if that were all true, it wouldn't change the meaning. You can't say because of the transgression of my people, a plague befell them, has anything to do with all the text reference to someone who was imprisoned, had judgment, what will be his generation, for he was cut off from the land. That's not about a country. That's about an individual. So anyway, this clause, a plague befell them, is dubious just because it doesn't fit the sentence anyway. But now we have the definitive answer. The oldest text always has to be the better, and the oldest text is Isaiah 53 from scroll 1Q Isaiah. This is dated to 150 BC, 150 years before Christ. Verse 8, let's read it. He was taken away by oppression and judgment, and as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living and stricken for the disobedience of my people. Verse 9, they made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich man in his death, although he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Okay, so all I can say is the proof text, I'm only going to mention the proof text here, does not satisfy being valid, because even the Masoretes are human beings, and they can make mistakes, and they can add a sentence like this or half a sentence. Could it have been from bias? Could it have been from lazy eyes? Could it have been a mistake? Yes, it could have been any one of those things, but we don't need to know. All we need to know is what we can see on the page. Whatever text Toviah Singer is looking at is beaten by the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest text. And remember, the Jewish Publication Society version also does not have this language. Okay, so now we'll reach our conclusion, but we'll have a little appendix about Leeser. I just want you to know a little bit more about him. But Toviah Singer's Isaiah 53 argument is an utter failure in his number one proof, which was from verse 8, that it said them, not his. And so that was the basis for which he was saying, hey, look at all these Christian texts. They have him or his. As we saw, Leeser says, he's a Hebrew scholar in 1853, he says it is his. And yet you have Toviah Singer saying, no, it's them, and he doesn't tell you what text he's relying upon. So now let's go look through the 3 points of this video. Number one, the Jewish Publication Society of 1917 lacks entirely the verse "a plague befell them." So the whole idea of them, it goes away if this entire line is gone. Number two, Leeser in 1853 has, quote, "the plague fell on him, not them." So that does away with that argument. Three, the Dead Sea Scrolls, like the Jewish Publication Society 1917 version of the Bible, lacks entirely "a plague befell them." So you've got two texts that don't even have it at all. You have one that does have it, but it only has him, which all three contradict Toviah Singer's claim. Verse 4, nothing in Singer's reading proves a suffering servant is the people of Israel. It's just something he's supposing. He's throwing it out as a possibility, but never proves it. And in fact, when you read just the verse 8 in context, you go, this is about someone who fits Jesus, whether you like it or not. Okay, so that's the end of that argument. Now, I just want to show you that there's no chance that this gentleman, this proof here, Leeser 1853, is anybody who's trying to help Christianity. So we're going to take a look at that real quick. So, who was Isaac Leeser? And why is his English translation of 1853 so close to the Dead Sea Scrolls of the 1947 plus era, but distant from the Jewish Publication Society Bible of 1917, and even more distant from the words of Toviah Singer in his accounts of what Scripture says? So this is a fascinating issue, particularly since Isaac Leeser, you'll see, is Orthodox Jew, and Toviah Singer himself claims to be an Orthodox Jew. So this is a person in his lineage. He should have some connection to the manuscripts he used, but apparently does not. Who is Isaac Leeser? Isaac Leeser, born 1806, died 1868, was an American Orthodox Jewish religious leader, teacher, scholar, and publisher. He helped found the Jewish Press of America, produced the first Jewish translation of the Bible into English, and helped organize various social and educational organizations. He's considered one of the most important 19th century American Jewish personalities. He was fiercely opposed to Reform Judaism and was regarded as one of the most important Orthodox rabbis of his era. Leeser is regarded as a forerunner by both modern Orthodox Judaism and conservative Judaism. So the possibility this man is at all in the camp of Christianity is ridiculous. So I think this is enough to say he's not in their camp. But you can also read the preface to his work and you'll see he's not in the camp of Protestantism. He's a definite Jewish person fighting for Judaism, and he was the first one to translate the Hebrew Bible into English. That is a fundamentally famous, he should be a famous person. Okay, Tyndale was the famous person who translated the Bible into English for us. Why isn't Leeser is just as famous? But he isn't. That's the way it goes. Okay, anyway, God bless. Follow up with us the next time, because we're going to have an exciting follow through with taking a look at Toviah Singer's other readings in Isaiah 53 and comparing them to the Dead Sea Scrolls, comparing them to Leeser, and comparing them to the Jewish Publication Society. You'll find it fascinating, I'm sure. All right, God bless. Take care. Ciao, bye.